Going to be talking about the digital decade because that's the topic that we are all been excited to hear about what's happening in the internet or in the technology space in this particular decade, right? So what the focus mainly is on the impact side of it. So how is technology impacting India in this decade or in the next 10 years, and talk about some of the trends. Primarily my experience is based on meeting if not hundreds, at least low hundreds, right? 100 or 200 other entrepreneurs who are actually changing and living this particular dream today in India. I've met many of them across length and breadth of the country, and primarily that's because of my role. I should thank Yahoo for providing me that opportunity. But very inspirational stories out there, and some of them are actually doing it. So I'm not going to talk a lot about what's coming in the next 50 years or what's coming in the next 20 years. I'm going to talk about what's there today and how it is changing or impacting our lives. When I say our lives, the larger context in society. So let me just make sure this clicker works. Great. So before I move on, I want to kind of roll back about 2 decades, right? Let's go into the early 1990s, because that's probably when we knew actually technology starts impacting, right? Somewhere in the early 90s is when the internet actually started coming in, and you can see the massive explosion of what we call as a technology, which is synonymous with the internet today. But right before that, this picture probably symbolizes that particular time. It's anybody knows what this is? This is the Berlin Wall. In 1989, the Berlin Wall came down, crashing down, and obviously it held a lot of promise. It held a lot of promise around us of a unified world, of unified people, and all of us speaking the same language, of freedom and everything else. And obviously in the 90s, technology actually accelerated that process. However, there was something which was happening by the end of late 90s, is what I call as the digital divide. You guys must have been familiar with this particular term of digital divide. What's happening is there are some segment of the population who actually have benefited a lot more from the technology than the other segment. There was a segment which was disenfranchised, mainly because they probably did not know how to get onto that bandwagon. So we started seeing there was a huge chasm which was developing, and many folks, many companies, many leaders started asking why. What is the nature of this digital divide? Why does it divide people? And this is surreal. It is not like the wall that you can touch and feel, right? It is very more subtle. And what is the nature of the digital divide, and what makes that happen? Then you see that, then you probably can answer the question about how do you cross that chasm. Now, there are 3 things that they came up with. There were multiple reports which were done, and they came up with 3 things. First thing they said was the digital divide starts with a reduced opportunity to own tools. Right? And tools meaning like computers, internet access, information, and stuff like that, right? And which impacted skills, lack of opportunity to actually learn how to use them and how to leverage them, and which obviously resulted in low-income jobs. And this is a vicious cycle. This is a completely vicious cycle. People who have less access to or opportunity to access resulted in not developing the skills that is required, and therefore not leveraging for their own benefit. And this kept on going. And similarly, the reverse side of the coin was people who had access obviously were on a virtuous cycle which was going there. So on one side there was a positive spiral, on the other side there was a negative spiral. Obviously the chasm was developing, right? So very simply put, it is the access to the technology which was hindering people or helping people, whichever side of the digital divide you come from, which results in skills development and which results in the use of that skill. So this they found was actually contributing to the whole problem of the digital divide. And so there are haves and there are have-nots on both sides, but is there a way we can bridge this, and who will bridge this? Right? That was a question which was asked in the late 90s, and this is just to kind of give you a background of how the whole thing is evolving. Now, yes, do we have a Superman who can come and actually solve this problem? And lo and behold, in 2000s there was a Superman, but the Superman was not in the form that you expected. The Superman is the cell phone. The Superman was basically the tool which is on every Indian's hand today. 800 million of them holding this Superman tool in their hand, which gives them immediate access to all the things that is required to get onto the technology and start using it, leveraging it for their own benefit. So in the early 2000s, you can see the map here, and what the map says is that obviously the dark blue or gray and the blue part of it were a little better in terms of the technology used on the axis, and the yellow part was obviously on the weaker side of it, and you can see India pretty much on the yellow side. But by 2009 or 10, look at what happened. Look at what happened. You can pretty much see that we are sitting, the whole world has moved, and you can see the rapid adoption of the technology, and primarily resulting through the cellular telephone growth, which has enabled that. And very ironically, you can see the fixed line growth is kind of on a dipping side, right? So there's a reduction of the fixed line telephone, and there's a humongous amount of exponential rise in terms of the cellular telephone, and obviously even internet is going up, and mobile internet is actually slowly catching up there too. So in India, the story is even more remarkable. You can see that pretty much as early as December 2, we were pretty close to zero. We never had, how many people had telephones in the first place, right? And we never even caught on to it. As you can see, before it was born, it was dead. Right? What we did was we leapfrogged over that particular trend, and we caught on to the cell phone revolution that has come about, and you can see remarkable growth. Today, about 800 mobile subscribers who are using it. So this is a fantastic story. So what does it mean? Can we just call it victory and go back home and say, yes, we crossed the digital divide? The answer is it as good as it looks? The answer is a little more complex than that. Now, when you start sorting out this particular image to see what is the difference between the developed and the developing economies, you can see a huge amount of problem there. You can see that actually in 1998, the digital divide was smaller. Now the chasm has even increased. Even though there is tremendous growth on this side, the difference is still growing. The difference is still growing. What does it mean? We are in a developing economy. Typically, it's 7 years behind a developed economy today. Right? Same story on the internet side. It's in fact 10 years on the internet side. Same story on the fixed broadband subscribers, another 7 years there. Well, on a mobile broadband itself is a recent phenomenon, so obviously it's about 5 years. But as you can see, the gap is quite yawning and still yawning, even after all this telecom revolution we talk about. So there's something wrong going on here. And that's exactly what we need to be looking at or asking questions about. And what is it? And before we even go further, India, in this list of over 200 plus countries which were surveyed, comes under 116 or 117. So we call ourselves as, wow, fantastic, look at the last decade, but obviously we have a long way to go even before we can start talking about where we are with respect to the rest of the world. In fact, we got worse off between 2 years. We were 116, now we are 117. So what's going on here? The picture looks so confusing now. It's no longer very clear if you are really doing well or if you're actually doing bad, right? We are relatively worse off, and that's what the real answer is. Why hasn't the divide shrunk? Why hasn't the divide shrunk? And that's something worth thinking about, despite all these different type of gadgets that's on everybody's pockets right now. Right? It's getting smarter and smarter. Everybody has more than one cell phones. Each of us have cell phone plus a tablet plus a laptop plus a desktop, anything you talk about. But still, the divide is still astonishingly complex. Now, there are 3 reasons that people surmise about why it is still the case. Number 1 is that most often what has happened was we have been approaching the problem with the technology for technology's sake. We take any technology, it comes out there and say, hey, here's what technology can do, so go figure, right? So it is always that it's been imposed on people in terms of what the technology can do. The second is we've been involved in a lot of copycat business models. We see it working in some economies. Maybe we take some model which worked in the West and just copy it and replicate it in India, and you just hope that it'll work, right? And the third problem was that we were focusing too much on the top of the pyramid. And the top of the pyramid, I mean, are the ones which are socio-economically well-to-do section of the society. So these are the 3 major reasons why there is a still yawning gap in terms of digital divide. So is there something we can do about it? But let's look at what India is in the first place before we even answer if there is anything that we can do about it. India, our country, is about 1.2 billion people, right? And Just about 10 years ago, we used to call this as a population problem. Now we call it as a demographic dividend, right? Mainly because we realize that human capital is as important as anything else earlier, and that's in abundance in India, right? But what are we doing with that? And India is also a land of ironies. There are Ferraris driving next to the cattle carts. India is also very diverse in terms of its distribution. 32% of us are urban, 68% of us are rural, right? There's a strong rural bent to it, whatever we may say. There are $69 billionaires in India, and there are maybe thousands millionaires living in India today. At the same time, you have 250 million people living on less than $1 a day, right? All of them sharing the same space. We have 22 official languages, 22, and thousands of dialects. Now, if you were to do an analysis of our reading pattern and take any of your news publications or your magazines and all that, you'll be surprised to see 90% of the readership is local language readership. All of the English languages, English magazine, their circulation put together constitutes less than 10%. It's got to probably be very amazing even in today's world that's the case. India is a very diverse country, culturally very, very diverse. You drive anywhere for about 100 kilometers and you will start seeing a completely different texture, completely different culture, completely different way of talking, and completely different way of behaving. So that's the other part of the deeper side of the India. So what does it mean from our psyche? We want it all cheap. We want all cheap. We want to pay per second. We want to buy small cars, and we want to basically buy sachets and shampoos in sachets. But that doesn't mean that we'll settle for bad quality or low quality. It's still got to be meeting up with anybody else. Even the sachets, if you actually see, most of them are very good brands, very good brands. Just because people can't afford to buy a liter of shampoo doesn't mean that they'd settle for anything less, right? Less quality than that. So what it means is that this particular earlier theory of how the digital divide can be solved needs to be relooked at. It needs to be revisited and say there's something wrong here. We're missing a big picture, and that's the part we would say. Now it can be relooked at, looking at particularly India, and say what is it that we missed the boat? And you realize that, number one, the technology needs to be a lot more relevant, right? You put something out there, but it has to be relevant for people. It has to be meaningful for people. It has to fit into their daily lives. That's very important. If you miss that part, you may have all the technology that you want, all the gizmos that you want, still won't make a dent in terms of the crossing the divide. Second is you got to focus on the adoption, which means you have to go all the way from the top of the pyramid to the bottom of the pyramid, and you have to span the entire length. Your technology solutions, or whatever solution you are coming up with, need to talk to people in the bottom of the pyramid equally as much as it talks to the top of the pyramid. And that's very important. And the third is it needs to have benefit, strong benefit for people to actually start thinking about it seriously or using it. And unless you solve these three, this picture, there's not much you can do about it, anything about it. There are three kind of shifts that you can think about in terms of India. This is actually simplifying the whole situation. Its situation is a lot more complex, but we can actually look at three kind of shifts in the Indian demographic setup. One is the top of the pyramid to the bottom of the pyramid, which is a socio-economic shift that you need to traverse. The second is the geographical shift. As you go from urban to rural, there are lots of assumptions we make in terms of availability of electricity to begin with, which is a big problem, right? And if you create solutions which cannot take these things into account, it's obviously not going to work for you. And the third is the age shift itself. The more and more we speak to people who are young adults who are very comfortable with technology, but we don't do such a good job in terms of speaking well to the kids as well as to the seniors. We miss the whole point about that. We make some assumptions that people who cannot speak English may not like technology or cannot learn technology. That's a huge amount of assumption we make, and it has been proven again and again that this is a myth. People who are not even literate are tremendous users of technology, and they actually pick up much faster. That's because somehow we associate literacy with intelligence. And that is a big mistake that we make today. And this is an assumption which rides in our subconscious level. If I bring it out to you and say, no, I don't make that assumption, but no, go back and look at your business plan. You make that assumption. So that's the part that we need to kind of look at it. So right now we are focusing more in this kind of circle, but we need to expand our mindset to broaden that particular part of it. So what's the solution? The solution is threefold again. It's you have to innovate for India. Copycat models will not work here at all. You have to look at the problem that is there in India and solve for it uniquely in the way it works in India. So that is innovation for India, not an innovation for US or not an innovation for Europe that can be copied and brought over here. You have to look at inclusion as integral to part of your plan. Without including people of different kinds, different cultures, different set of folks, and different set of mindset that they bring with them, it's impossible for you to solve this problem. Third is you have to make it as personalizable as possible. Each of us are much more emotionally connected first, more than rationally connected. That's the way we live it. We are like that only kind of a thing. So unless you make it more interactive, more personalized, that becomes a problem for you. So that's the cycle that we need to work through. So I'm going to walk through some examples of the people that I picked, primarily from India-specific examples. I have not focused on. There are tons of examples outside India, but I have not focused for this particular session here today. I'm going to walk through a few examples of the people that I thought were doing something very interesting, and then go from urban to rural side to explain. How many people know about ZipDial? Okay. Oh, there's a lot of folks. Then probably I can skip through this. How many people know how they handle that, handle their service? It's a completely human-assisted model and not the technology. Technology does power. They have a tremendous amount of technology, which makes their service a lot more intelligent. But it's human-assisted, which is that touch, that nuance of thinking as to, in India, we like just calling and talking to a person. We don't like talking to a system. We don't like going on the internet and then looking up. They also have a website. How many people go there? I guess nobody. I have not been there. It's so easy just to call their number and then they pick up and they say, what do you want? And then you tell, I want a plumber. They say, which area? And they'll send it to you. And they blast that leads to so many other plumbers that before I keep the phone down, I have 3 other people calling me and saying, I heard you need a plumbing service. Right? So this is something, it's not a copycat model. It's actually a model which was taken from outside but made it so Indianized. That's very important for its adoption. Now, so much so that Mani, who runs this company, is now taking it to the US. Right? This is another beauty of it. What works in this kind of socioeconomic strata will work in the Western countries as well. How many people know about ZipDial? Okay, so they are much more interesting company around what they call as the missed call revolution of India. The concept of the missed call is so unique to India that I didn't hear about it until I returned back to India, where my driver would just call me and I pick up the phone, he gets angry. He's like, why did you pick up the phone? I said, you call me. And then he said, no, I call you to tell you that you have to call me back. So, oh, okay, I didn't know that. So this missed call kind of a concept is what they write on. They have created campaigns where students can vote for their favorite actor or something like that by just calling a number, and the number never gets connected. When you call the number disconnects on the first ring, but their vote is registered. Right? So this is another very unique and very interesting way. It's one example of how they do it. There are tons of other examples on their website where they talk about how they do it. Like, for example, you're walking down the road and you see an offer which is coming and say, buy this particular product for 30% cheaper. If you want this product, just call this number. And you call the number, nobody picks up. At the end of the first call, it gets disconnected. But in 3 minutes, a salesperson will call you and say, I believe you're interested in this product. Don't you love that? Right? And Apalia, do you guys know about Apalia? Have you used Apalia? Apalia is a feature phone video company. They can run different type of movies. They can run different type of sitcoms on your all sorts of feature phones. Feature phones. These are like 1,000 rupee phone. A lot of folks who are on the road, they want to just use this Apalia, and it works fantastic. It streams on a small Nokia 1,000 rupee handset, and it starts streaming. India is a land of entertainment. We love our entertainment, we love our music, we love our Bollywood. This year, last year, in 2010, do you know that digital music was bigger than the traditional music? Sales. You know which is the largest music company today in India in terms of revenue? Airtel. There you go. It's Airtel. Whoever would have thought that? We love our music, but we want it on our personal device, right? So that's very unique to how the way we live and we consume. Coolpad is a very interesting company. They are into translation and what is called as a transliteration. Many of us speak at least 2 languages. And when we speak, we mix these languages together, right? We call it as Hinglish, right? You speak in Hindi, but you mix some words which are in English, and we are very comfortable with that. And there's no solution out there which can do that. Coolpad came up with a technology where you can start typing Likhna, but what appears is the Hindi version of it, because it automatically recognizes that you are trying to type a Hindi word, because the Hindi keyboard is not there. Not there, but we love our language and we start using it. Huge, guys. Then moving a little lower down the strata, Bala Jobs. Have you guys heard about Bala Jobs? Yeah. Bala Jobs started by Sean. He's from ex-Microsoft Research. He's moved back to India and he kind of quit that and then started this maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. His idea is to help the informal sector, right? Like your drivers, your maids, your gardeners, your plumbers and all that. Use technology because they don't have access to it. They just don't have access to it. They're left out. If they want a job, it's so difficult for them. And he was telling a story where he said most of these guys run into trouble because of some medical emergency in their house. Somebody breaks their leg or a hand, they go to the hospital and that sucks the life out of them. They are in debt forever, right? So for them, whatever they are doing, they need to get a job fast to start getting their life back together. It's that difficult when you live in that kind of reality. And Bala Jobs is an example where using your cell phone, you can register yourself by saying, I am a maid looking for a job in Gachibowli. And send an email to them or SMS to them, and they will call you back with jobs and saying, here are the 3 people looking for jobs for you, right? Fantastic guy, fantastic, with a lot of passion. Digital green, I'm not sure if you guys know. Now I'm going more and more rural and more different type of depth there. Digital green was started by Serene Gandhi, who is ex-Microsoft again. And Microsoft done a lot of work here in this space. So what they do is they realize that most of these farmers, they're not literate in the sense that they can go and read things. Correct? But there are a ton of best practices they follow in the farming best practices, in the way they store things, in the way they work in the fields, in the way they kind of do certain things like rain harvesting or water harvesting and stuff like that. All the things that makes a lot of difference to them. But how do you disseminate this information? It's all in pockets. What happens in one village never gets around to another village, right? And there are thousands of villages we have here, and why can't we have an efficient way in which this best practices gets disseminated? And that's the business he is in. What he does is he empowers the farmers to take pictures of themselves, video shoot themselves while demonstrating the best practice that they are doing it. And he distributes the videos to thousands of villages. So another farmer sitting in a village square can actually view this video, which gets projected on the village in the evening once they come back and all that, and they'll learn from what best practices which have been adopted, and they adopt it. And what he has done, some of the work he has done is, if some volunteer, NGO volunteer goes and tells them, hey, here's the best practice, here's what you need to go do, the adoption rate is so low. So low. But a peer, another farmer who has actually adopted it and showing it to them, its adoption rate is extremely high. That's a small bit of nuance. You could always say, why is he doing all this? All you have to do is write down what the best practice is, teach it to your guys who are NGO volunteers. They can go and spread it. Guess what? Doesn't work. Just doesn't work. So in all these things, it's not like they have done some very radical stuff. They've used technology to empower this. But the nuances in the way that people work and their mind works is much more important to bring that adoption and use the technology for that is much more important. Nokia Life Tools, have you guys used it? I'm sure you guys have heard about it. It's available in 18 languages. What it gives you, basic problem. What is the weather looking like? Should I start sowing my crop today? Basic problem. Believe me, they spend a lot of money on seeds, fertilizers and other stuff that if they sow the crop in the wrong time, they are in debt for 3 years. 3 years. That's the kind of gamble that they call their life as. Now, very simple basic problem. Second problem, once you've done that, you've grown and you've got your harvest, should I go and sell today? This is a big problem. I never thought about it until I went and spoke to these guys. Why is that a problem? The problem is like this. You have a big, your harvest. You have to hire a tractor or something else for which you have to pay money, and then you dump it on the tractor. You go early morning to the mandi, right? And you go there, and until you reach there, you don't know what the price of the commodity is. And by then it's too late. Because you have already put in money to transport. The transportation cost is very high. It actually eats into a lot of their margins, right? And you go there and you realize that the rate has dropped. You don't have a choice to come back and go back again on the second day because you've got a sunk cost here that you need to cover, right? So they help that. BSNL also provides similar thing, but on the phone, human-assisted stuff. eChowpal, I'm sure you guys have heard about it, right? eChowpal is very, very famous. They help in a lot of different ways because they also provide this computers in the panchayats and all that stuff for sharing best practices, sharing information and everything else, etc. And Vino actually provides last mile banking. It takes the bank to the farmer, to the field. So there's a guy who's carrying it in their, the entire authentication system where you put your thumbprint and he gives you money, he takes money, he deposits in the bank, they take it to the last one. Humongous amount of technology actually goes behind actually making this happen because there is a scale involved, right? We're talking about thousands of places which can do that. My final story is a Nano Ganesh. Have you guys heard about it? It's a fantastic tool by Nokia. It was actually created by a guy who has learned it from his own grandfather's experience. His grandfather happens to be a farmer. Simple problem. The grandfather lives in town or in a village, and he has to walk almost like 3 miles to his field. And why does he have to go to the field? Because he needs to switch on the pump to water his field. But he walks all the way, and then he realizes that electricity is not available. There's a power cut. You need to come back after maybe 3 hours later. So he just walked all the way 3 kilometers and then 3 miles, walks back all the way back to his home, and then 3 or 4 hours later he goes back there, not knowing whether the electricity has come back or not, right? So what happens is that it's a simple tool which works on Nokia. One Nokia phone sits at the pump level, and the other Nokia phone is where the person holds it. All you need to do is send an SMS to that phone. Is electricity available? And the SMS comes back to you, no. Okay, then send an SMS, electricity available, and the SMS comes back, yes. Turn on my pump, and the pump gets turned on, right? But here is the nuance. You can actually listen to the sound of the water gushing out. That's the feedback that is required by the farmer. Why would he trust it otherwise? I've sent an SMS, but did it actually turn on? I don't know. I got to walk all the way to find out whether the technology is working. No. That's a phone which is connected there. So the phone switches on and you can hear the water gushing out. Also, if you know that if the water is a trickle or a gush, depending on that, he has to turn off maybe in half an hour or 1 hour, right? This is the kind of nuances. This is the kind of way technology can actually impact life. Finally, what does it all mean to us? It actually proves that using technology and using today's existing technology, you can actually solve a lot of problems at the bottom of the pyramid level. But many of us have this question, are they profitable enough to serve? Is a question that we have. Is there buying propensity which is there out there? And you realize that actually technology has a curve, unique curve like this. The cost of developing a technology tapers off at some level, and the cost of serving the customer also starts dropping at that level. After a certain level, you will see that the total cost actually dips, and that's the sweet spot everybody needs to be looked at in terms of adopting technology and taking it to that level, and then everybody benefits. So my final words is, go change the world. Thank you.